Scattered showers for Sunday in the 40s. I'm KIRO 7, pinpoint meteorologist Nick Allard.
It is cloudy and 41 degrees in downtown Seattle. I'm Ursula Royteen.
Listen on demand. Go to mynorthwest.com and click podcasts. KIRO Radio 97.3 FM. News and talk. Powered by the Pacific Northwest.
The Big Lead is brought to you by 3010 Weight Loss for Life.
The Dori Monson Show on KIRO Radio. This is The Big Lead.
Coming to you from the Carter Subaru studio and streaming on Facebook Live. Welcome to the big show. I just called a quick audible here. I put on a T-shirt this morning thinking, well, I'm just going to leave my sweatshirt on all day because it's the T-shirt that I don't ever want anybody to see me in.
It looks fine.
But it's too warm in the studio, so I took my sweatshirt off, and now I'm sitting here in this ridiculous tie-dye looking T-shirt.
It doesn't look tight. It looks fine.
I look ridiculous. If you want to watch live on Facebook Live, you can check it. Is it like a scoop neck? What is that
No,
neck?
it's
Is it
fine.
okay?
It's a
All right.
crew neck. It's fine.
I'm feeling very self-conscious today. Okay, Pete Carroll's going to join us between 12:30 and 1 o'clock for his weekly visit in advance of the huge Seahawks game coming up. They're all huge at this point in the season. In Philadelphia against the Eagles, a game you will hear right here in your home of the Seahawks, 97.3 KIRO FM. So Pete Carroll between 12:30 and 1 o'clock this afternoon. And as you just heard in Ursula's newscast, newly minted gubernatorial candidate. I'm ticked off at Iman on so many levels, and I'm going to tell him this too.
Stole your thunder.
Well, number one, if he's going to announce something, he should announce it on this show and nowhere else. Number two, he might be able to beat Inslee. Does he really think he could beat me? I'm going to ask him that.
Okay.
I'm going to ask him that when he comes on at 12:30.
I think he's just assuming you're not going to run.
Well, you know what? Every time I think I'm not, something like this happens. The idea of beating Jay Inslee is delicious to me. The idea of beating Jay Inslee and Tim Iman along the way, that's almost irresistible to me. So we'll see. I don't know. We'll see. It's a Friday. We have a Dori Monson Show exclusive for you.
The Big Lead. Dori Monson Show exclusive.
First of all, let me tell you how this story came to us. A source with the Washington State Patrol contacted us and wanted us to know about an arrest they had made a couple of nights ago. And they told us that the guy they arrested works for the Washington State Attorney General's office. And when you hear the narrative in this State Patrol report, I think you will be as shocked as I am. But here's the thing. Why did the Washington State Patrol, a source, reach out to us? Because they were afraid, because of the position and power of this guy who they arrested, they were afraid that this case and this whole story and this whole arrest would just somehow disappear. Now, I will tell you, and I'm not going to name the guy they arrested yet, because he's not yet been charged, and that may, we're waiting on the blood draw that they got. So I'm not going to name him yet, although I certainly could, because he's a government employee, and as a watchdog of government, while we don't normally name people until they are charged, I certainly could. In fact, I was going to, but I don't think it changes the story if you hear this guy's name. But I just want you to know that this guy is a prosecutor for the Washington State Attorney General's office, for Bob Ferguson's office, okay? And then tell me, after you hear the narrative in this Washington State Patrol report, tell me if you think this is somebody who should be prosecuting other people for violations of the law. This happened just 2 nights ago, November 20th, 2:40 in the morning. And I will also say we have yesterday and again today reached out to the Attorney General's office for comment. They know that we're talking about this story, but they have chosen to not come on and talk about it with us. The trooper who writes the report is Daniel Knox, Washington State Patrol Trooper Daniel Knox. At approximately 2:43 a.m., he was on patrol, and I will get to the narrative. I contacted the defendant on the passenger side of the vehicle. Upon contact, and the reason he contacted him was the State Patrol Trooper was pulled off to the side of the road with his lights going, and this guy just went flying by him at full speed, didn't slow down, didn't pull over for an emergency vehicle as you are supposed to. I contacted the defendant on the passenger side of the vehicle. Upon contact, I advised the defendant the reason for the stop was for failing to move over for an emergency vehicle. The defendant stated he saw me on the traffic stop and attempted to slow down. I could smell an obvious odor of intoxicants coming from inside of the vehicle. I asked the defendant for his license and registration. The defendant's speech was thick and slurred, and his movements appeared slow and exaggerated. The defendant fumbled with his driver's license as he removed it from his wallet. I identified him as, and again, I'm going to redact the name, but he is a Washington State Attorney General's attorney, prosecutor. I asked him where he was coming from, and he said work. I asked him where he worked, and all he would tell me was that he worked for the government. I asked him for his registration and insurance. He handed me 2 separate expired insurance cards. He could not locate a valid insurance card or the vehicle's registration. I asked him how much alcohol he had to drink tonight, and he stated none. I returned to my patrol car and turned off the emergency lights on the front of my patrol car. I asked him to talk with me in front of the vehicle. He agreed. I again asked how much alcohol he had to drink, and he stated none. I could smell an obvious odor of intoxicants coming from his breath, and his eyes were bloodshot and watery. I asked him if he would perform voluntary field sobriety tests, and he stated he was safe to drive and he did not want to perform tests. I told him I was smelling intoxicants coming from within the vehicle and from him. I advised him it was his right to refuse the tests, but I had to make my determination if he was safe to drive off my observations to that point. He said, I respect your authority and your discretion. I can tell you I do not have alcohol on board. I asked him once more if he had any alcohol to drink, and he stated no. I said, why don't you want to perform the field sobriety test if you haven't consumed any alcohol? And he said, again, you told me that I'm being audio and video recorded. I do not want to create favor with law enforcement. I am aware of procedures. So he refused the field sobriety test. And at that point, the Washington State Patrol Trooper arrested this prosecutor for the Washington State Attorney General's office. Once I determined, back to the State Patrol's narrative, once I determined he was unable to safely operate a motor vehicle, I placed him under arrest for DUI. I handcuffed him. I told him his vehicle was going to be towed. When we arrived at Tacoma PD, I asked him if he would submit to the breath test. He continued to tell me he has seen firsthand that breath tests are inaccurate and he does not trust them. He advised me he was refusing the breath test. I advised him I would be applying for a search warrant to obtain a sample of his blood, and he stated he understood. Okay, so the State Patrol Trooper, based on all of his experience, he thinks that this Attorney General's employee is drunk or drinking. And he refuses the breath test. The cop tells him, then I'm going to get a warrant for a blood test. Here's where things start to get a little problematic, in where I wonder if you and I would have the same clout that this defendant has. So the trooper contacted, let me back up a little bit. When I completed my search warrant for blood, I sent it via email to Judge Frank Cuthberton. At approximately 4:10 a.m., Judge Cuthberton replied to my email and stated he did not find adequate cause for a blood draw warrant based on the declaration. So the judge initially says, I'm not going to let you take blood from this Attorney General's prosecutor, even though the State Patrol trooper, based on all his experience, thought it was warranted. Back to the narrative, the report of DUI investigation. I contacted State Patrol Communications via telephone, and they conferenced me in with Judge Cuthberton. The phone call was on a recorded line. Judge Cuthberton advised me that he thought my declaration was soft, and he did not think there was enough there. Judge Cuthberton continued and advised me that he looked back over the warrant, and he observed that the defendant had declined to refuse the test. Judge Cuthberton advised me there was another issue. He stated he did not know if he was mutual and detached on the situation. Judge Cuthberton advised that he knew the defendant. Judge Cuthberton stated he was formerly a Pierce County prosecuting attorney and has moved on to the Attorney General's office. Judge Cuthberton advised me that he believed the defendant was working because he's like that. I saw the tie was on his seat, and he is a workaholic. And you know, sometimes when you're driving at 2 and 3 in the morning, your eyes can be bloodshot and stuff, the judge said. So the judge knows this AG's prosecutor, tried to decline the warrant for a blood test, made excuses, it sounds like. The reason his eyes were bloodshot and stuff, maybe because he was working till 2 or 3 in the morning. The State Patrol trooper advised Judge Cuthberton that when I removed the defendant from the holding cell, there was an obvious odor of intoxicants coming from inside. He had slurred speech, slow responses, an obvious odor of intoxicants coming from his breath. And Judge Cuthberton then said, okay, based on all of that, yes, I will let you do a blood draw. So they went to St. Clair's Hospital. And then things get even crazier. The AG prosecutor said, I will not submit to a blood draw. He said he was going to fight the blood draw. And he said, I understand this will appear to you as obstruction, but I have to protect myself. So then the hospital staff arranged for a room for them to draw blood. This State Patrol trooper at 4 in the morning had to call backup units, and they ended up with 4 cops. They got this guy on his belly on the bed. They've handcuffed him to the bed posts. They're holding him down. He's physically struggling, trying to resist the whole time. So much so that he cut his wrists on the handcuffs from struggling. Another trooper got on top of the bed and applied pressure to the defendant's back with a knee. The defendant struggled through the entire blood draw, and he advised us multiple times he did not consent. He did not consent. A technician succeeded in withdrawing the blood. When they took off the handcuffs, I saw that he was injured. The injuries were due to him attempting to resist the blood draw with a sergeant in the room. They asked him, the defendant said, can you not book me in jail? I'm afraid for my safety in jail. He said he served in the military and he's worked for the government for years. I told him, I advised him earlier, if he resisted the blood draw, I would take him to jail. While en route to jail, the defendant stated he wanted to clarify what he was saying to me at the office. He asked if I could use my discretion and not book him in jail. He asked if I could refer charges instead. I told him I made my decision to book him just as I would do with any other citizen. Congratulations to this State Patrol trooper. But I want you to think about this. You have a judge who initially said, no, I'm not going to grant the warrant because I know this guy. And then but then the judge did give a warrant after the trooper said, but I smell it from him. He's slurred speech. Then a guy who works for the Attorney General's office refuses the breath test, knowing you get arrested if you refuse a breath test, goes to the hospital, struggles so much through the blood draw that 4 cops had to pin him down, and then he repeatedly, I work for the government. Please don't take me to jail. I fear for my safety in jail. We will follow this case through to its conclusion. But here's what I will tell you. This happened just 2 nights ago. Again, why did sources reach out to the Dori Monson show and want us to tell this story? Because they were afraid, with judges who know this guy, and initially tried to deny the blood draw warrant, with his power in the Attorney General's office. You know, Bob Ferguson really protects his own. They were afraid this story would disappear if we didn't tell it. We have told it. And I assure you, this story will not disappear. And that is your big lead for today.
The Big Lead on KIRO Radio.
Whew, we're just getting started for the day. Pete Carroll, his weekly visit, he will spend the next half hour with us here on the Dori Monson Show.
This hour of the Dori Monson Show is brought to you by Insulation Northwest.
There are a lot of firsts in life, like owning your first